The Right of Children to Free and Compulsory Education Act or Right to Education Act, is an act of the Parliament of India enacted on August 4, 2009, which describes the modalities of the importance of free and compulsory education for children between 6 and 14 in India under Article 21A of the Indian Constitution. India became one of 135 countries to make education a fundamental right of every child when the Act came into force on April 1, 2010. History. Present Act has its history in the drafting of the Indian Constitution at the time of independence but is more specifically to the constitutional amendment of 2002 that included the Article 21A in the Indian Constitution making education a fundamental right. This amendment, however, specified the need for a legislation to describe the mode of implementation of the same which necessitated the drafting of a separate education bill. A rough draft of the bill was composed in year 2005. It received much opposition due to its mandatory provision to provide 25% reservation for disadvantaged children in private schools. The subcommittee of the Central Advisory Board of Education which prepared the draft bill held this provision as a significant prerequisite for creating a democratic and egalitarian society. Indian Law Commission had initially proposed 50% reservation for disadvantaged students in private schools. On May 7, 2014, the Supreme Court of India ruled that Right to Education Act is not applicable to minority institutions. Passage. The bill was approved by the Cabinet on July 2, 2009. Rajya Sabha passed the bill on July 20, 2009 and the Lok Sabha on August 4, 2009. It received presidential assent and was notified as law on August 26, 2009 as the Children's Right to Free and Compulsory Education Act. The law came into effect in the whole of India except the state of Jammu and Kashmir from April 1, 2010, the first time in the history of India a law was brought into force by a speech by the Prime Minister. In his speech, Manmohan Singh, Prime Minister of India stated that, "We are committed to ensuring that all children, irrespective of gender and social category, have access to education. An education that enables them to acquire the skills, knowledge, values and attitudes necessary to become responsible and active citizens of India." Highlights. The Act makes education a fundamental right of every child between the ages of 6 and 14 and specifies minimum norms in elementary schools. It requires all private schools to reserve 25% of seats to children. Kids are admitted into private schools based on caste-based reservations. See page 9 and point 04 of this document. It also prohibits all unrecognized schools from practice, and makes provisions for no donation or capitation fees and no interview of the child or parent for admission. The Act also provides that no child shall be held back, expelled, or required to pass a board examination until the completion of elementary education. There is also a provision for special training of school dropouts to bring them up to par with students of the same age. The ROOT Act requires surveys that will monitor all neighborhoods, identify children requiring education, and set up facilities for providing it. The World Bank Education Specialist for India, Sam Carlson, has observed, "The ROOT Act is the first legislation in the world that puts the responsibility of ensuring enrollment, attendance and completion on the government. It is the parents' responsibility to send the children to schools in the US and other countries." The right to education of persons with disabilities until 18 years of age is laid down under a separate legislation, the Persons with Disabilities Act. A number of other provisions regarding improvement of school infrastructure, teacher-student ratio and faculty are made in the Act. Implementation and funding. Education in the Indian Constitution is a concurrent issue and both centre and states can legislate on the issue. The Act lays down specific responsibilities for the centre, state and local bodies for its implementation. The states have been clamoring that they lack financial capacity to deliver education of appropriate standard in all the schools needed for universal education. Thus it was clear that the central government will be required to subsidize the states. A committee set up to study the funds requirement and funding initially estimated that Rs 1710 billion or 1.71 trillion across 5 years was required to implement the Act, and in April 2010 the central government agreed to sharing the funding for implementing the law in the ratio of 65 to 35 between the centre and the states, and a ratio of 90 to 10 for the northeastern states. However, in mid-2010, this figure was upgraded to Rs 2310 billion, and the centre agreed to raise its share to 68%. There is some confusion on this, with other media reports stating that the centre's share of the implementation expenses would now be 70%. At that rate, most states may not need to increase their education budgets substantially. A critical development in 2011 has been the decision taken in principle to extend the right to education till Class X and into the preschool age range. The CABE committee is in the process of looking into the implications of making these changes. Advisory Council on Implementation, the Ministry of HRD set up a high-level, 14-member National Advisory Council for implementation of the Act. The members include Kiran Karnik, former president of NASSCOM, Krishna Kumar, former director of the NCERT, Mrinal Miri, former vice-chancellor of Northeast Hill University, Yogendra Yadav, a Euro-social scientist. India, Sajat Krishnan Kutty, secretary of the Educators Assisting Children's Hopes India. Annie Namala, an activist and head of Centre for Social Equity and Inclusion, Abu Bakr Ahmad, vice president of Muslim Education Society, Kerala. Status of implementation. A report on the status of implementation of the Act was released by the Ministry of Human Resource Development on the one-year anniversary of the Act. The report admits that 8.1 million children in the age group 6-14 remain out of school and theory a Euro unregistered trademark SA shortage of 508,000 teachers countrywide. A shadow report by the RTE Forum representing the leading education networks in the country, however, challenging the findings, pointing out that several key legal commitments are falling behind the schedule. The Supreme Court of India has also intervened to demand implementation of the Act in the Northeast. It has also provided the legal basis for ensuring pay parity between teachers in government and government-aided schools. Haryana government has assigned the duties and responsibilities to Block Elementary Education Officers Euro Block Resource Coordinators for effective implementation and continuous monitoring of implementation of Right to Education Act in the state. Precedents. It has been pointed out that the RTE Act is not new. Universal adult franchise in the Act was opposed since most of the population was illiterate. Article 45 in the Constitution of India was set up as an act. The state shall endeavour to provide, within a period of 10 years from the commencement of this constitution, for free and compulsory education for all children until they complete the age of 14 years. As that deadline was about to be passed many decades ago, the education minister at the time, M.C. Shagla, memorably said, "Our constitution fathers did not intend that we just set up hovels, put students there, give and train teachers, give them bad textbooks, no playgrounds, and say, we have complied with Article 45 and primary education is expanding." They meant that real education should be given to our children between the ages of 6 and 14. M.C. Shagla, 1964. In the 1990s, the World Bank funded a number of measures to set up schools within easy reach of rural communities. This effort was consolidated in the Zavashik-Shoabian model in the 1990s. RTE takes the process further, and makes the enrollment of children in schools a state prerogative. Criticism. The Act has been criticized for being hastily drafted, not consulting many groups active in education, not considering the quality of education, infringing on the rights of private and religious minority schools to administer their system, and for excluding children under 6 years of age. Many of the ideas are seen as continuing the policies of Zavashik-Shoabian of the last decade, and the World Bank-funded District Primary Education Program (DPEP) of the 90s, both of which, while having set up a number of schools in rural areas, have been criticized for being ineffective and corruption-ridden. Quality of education. The quality of education provided by the government system is not good. While it remains the largest provider of elementary education in the country, forming 80% of all recognized schools, it suffers from shortages of teachers, infrastructural gaps, and several habitations continue to lack schools altogether. There are also frequent allegations of government schools being riddled with absenteeism and mismanagement, and appointments are based on political convenience. Despite the allure of free lunch food in the government schools, many parents send their children to private schools. Average schoolteacher salaries in private rural schools in some states are considerably lower than that in government schools. As a result, proponents of low-cost private schools critiqued government schools as being poor value for money. Children attending the private schools are seen to be at an advantage, thus discriminating against the weakest sections, who are forced to go to government schools. Furthermore, the system has been criticized as catering to the rural elites who are able to afford school fees in a country where a large number of families live in absolute poverty. The Act has been criticized as discriminatory for not addressing these issues. Well-known educationist Anil Sadagopal said of the hurriedly drafted Act, "It is a fraud on our children. It gives neither free education nor compulsory education. In fact, it only legitimizes the present multi-layered, inferior quality school education system where discrimination shall continue to prevail." Entrepreneur Gurcharan Das noted that 54% of urban children attend private schools, and this rate is growing at 3% per year. Even the poor children are abandoning the government schools. They are leaving because the teachers are not showing up. However, other researchers have countered the argument by citing that the evidence for higher standards of quality in private schools often disappears when other factors are controlled for. Public-private partnership. To address these quality issues, the Act has provisions for compensating private schools for admission of children under the 25% quota, which has been compared to school vouchers, whereby parents may send their children in any school, private or public. This measure, along with the increase in PPP, has been viewed by some organizations such as the All India Forum for Right to Education, as the state abdicating its constitutional obligation towards providing elementary education. Infringement on private schools, RTE Act. In September 2012, the Supreme Court subsequently declined a review petition of the Act. Barrier for orphans, the Act provides for admission of children without any certification. However, several states have continued pre-existing procedures insisting that children produce income and caste certificates, BPL cards and birth certificates. Orphan children are often unable to produce such documents, even though they are willing to do so. As a result, schools are not admitting them, as they require the documents as a condition to admission. Admissions. Though GOVT says economically backward children are admitted into private schools under RTE, but the fact is in the states like Andhra Pradesh, children are admitted into private schools based on caste-based reservations. Check page 9 and point no 4 of this below document. References. External links. Highlights of the bill introduced in the Parliament, 2010 Amendment to the Act, 2010 Right to Education India website, download full contents of the Act to PDF.